Hello, beautiful friends, and thank you for being here. Today, we're going to be going over the birth chart of Sylvia Plath. I just did a short TikTok reading of her, and just like I did with Edgar Allan Poe, I want to do a full analysis because it's nearly impossible to cover all of the significant aspects of a chart in such a short amount of time. And so we're going to do a deep dive now. I'm giving myself a 30-minute limit, so we'll see if I can stay within that. Sylvia's chart was highly requested, and I do believe this is because she had an exceptional life story, as well as her work indicates a lot going on under the surface. And we can definitely see all of that in her chart. This is another incredibly challenging birth chart. There is a lot, which I'll explain as we go through. There's a lot going on here. And just kind of a disclaimer, if I mention aspects that she has in her chart and then how I'm interpreting them, I am interpreting them for her and her life story. And the last thing I want to do is for anyone to ever apply what I say in a reading to their own chart. That's why I make content that's more general, because when I'm doing a reading on a chart, I am in that person's soul, the soul being the chart. I am not talking about anyone else besides this person, and every placement can manifest in different ways. So if I say something indicates mental illness or even suicide, which we will take a look at, that is not your story, that's Sylvia's. So also in this reading, I am going to get into a little bit of the heavier stuff because we know her chart and her story was full of some pretty dark stuff. And so I'm going to go a layer deeper. And so I do want to put kind of a disclaimer, trigger warning, if that will be upsetting, covering topics of suicide attempts and successful suicide. Mostly that I think will be the heaviest thing I'll dive into. But if these kind of things, depression, mental illness is triggering to you, please don't watch this video. I don't want to upset you. Okay, so with that said, we'll get started here with her chart. So Sylvia's ascendant falls at 29 degrees of Aquarius. If you look through the folder on TikTok of the celebrity readings I've done, you'll notice that I'm going to say maybe not most, but at least half of them will have a 29-degree ascendant. That is not a coincidence. 29-degree ascendant people have this certain weight and authority to your life story, to their life story, because our life story will follow kind of the archetypal flow of the sign on the horizon. And at 29 degrees, there's a finality and a mastery that's happening. But it's usually like, I kind of see 29-degree ascendant people playing out a big life because it's like a grand finale of the sign. There's a completion happening, but it's like almost an exploded completion, like a firework is what I'm seeing in my mind. So 29-degree ascendant people naturally holding a lot of weight, but in the sign of Aquarius, this does indicate a natural genius, someone who is incredibly good with intellect, with Aquarius being the last air sign, the most mature zodiacally. It's a sign of genius relating to Saturn traditionally, but Uranus modernly, and Uranus is the planet of genius. So this is a brilliant person already, and there's a lot more dimension we're going to fill in that will show us just how intelligent she was. But 29-degree ascendant, the thing with Aquarius though is that Aquarius risings are ruled modernly by Uranus, which is the planet of trauma. So there can be sudden unexpected events that can be psychological, it can be internal things, external, but the point of Uranus is unpredictable things, which traumatic experiences falls into that category easily. So we do often see someone who's experienced some degree of trauma in their life, emotional, physical, etc. But looking at this chart here, she does have two chart rulers. We find that her traditional chart ruler being Saturn, which we'll talk more about, Saturn in the 11th house ruling, also Aquarius being the sign of the collective. This is someone who's going to be known. It's conjuncting her part of fortune in the 11th house too, which is also in Aquarius. This is someone who will be known for the work that they do, for their mastery, Saturn, for their hard work, Saturn and Capricorn at home, their hard work and their mastery of their craft. It might be bumpy at first. Saturn in the 11th house people often feel lonely, maybe even weird early in life, but then they get to a point where they become like this authority figure and are then looked up to. Saturn in the 11th house will be known for what they do, for being a master of what they do. We see that ruling her ascendant, already someone who's going to be a big deal. But then we see her Uranus placement, and her Uranus placement in the second house in Aries. This is oftentimes can be traumatic experiences or a feeling of instability at home in childhood in the second house. In Aries, something to do with the physical body, illness, things of that sort. It doesn't have to manifest negatively though. Aries, an Aries Uranus person is going to be very headstrong. And we know this about Sylvia. Her mom has said this about her, a headstrong child. But this Uranus is building us into a T-square that Sylvia has in her chart because of when she was born, that nobody born today has. Like, we all, unless you were born around 1932, we can't relate to this because the planets haven't been in a position. They're outer planets, so they move slowly. So this configuration was happening in the sky for a while, and I believe we can see that very much reflected in history, of crazy stuff happening. And this aspect was a part of Sylvia forever because she was born with it natally. So we see a T-square, Uranus being pressured by Saturn in Capricorn and Pluto in Cancer. This is chaotic, okay? Because all of these planets are often considered malefics in modern astrology, can play malefic roles. But we see Saturn, the energy of the past, the energy of tradition, and of following a set path, putting in the time, Saturn, to become the master, but you really have to climb the mountain goat, Saturn, Capricorn, especially with Saturn and Capricorn. You have to climb the mountain and follow the structure, and then you'll be rewarded eventually for your hard work. Uranus is like, nope, none of that. Here I am, I'm brilliant, and I want to be new, and I want the future, and I want it now. I don't care. Super headstrong. But then Pluto, planet of destruction, and basically of everything falling apart, there is a destruction of the past and of the status quo that is happening. And I do believe this is one of the most significant aspects of Sylvia's chart because of the fact that Uranus is her modern chart ruler, and it's being pressured by these two very important outer planets. She needed to break the mold. But still, with Saturn being her other chart ruler, she had a strong desire to fit in, right? She went to school. We can see early in her career that she really adhered to the poetic laws and rules, trying to structure her poems perfectly, like how the other poets of the time did. She really put in the Saturn time to be a master of her craft by the book, to learn the tradition and do that well. But then Pluto Uranus, later in her life, she was like, no. And that also relates to her nodes, which I'm definitely going to talk about in a minute. But she really had to Saturn learn the rules and then get rid of them completely and do something that's never been done. The way that she wrote was something that's never been done. But Uranus also relates to electricity. So, and with Pluto being also about the subconscious, but can relate to mental health, Saturn can also relate to anxiety and fear. This is definitely some mental health struggles we're starting to see, and this is written all over her chart, but this is one big place we're seeing it. And Aries being the head, electroshock therapy as being a key part of her path. We know that she had to go through that several times for her depression. And the depression is from this Saturn-Pluto opposition, Saturn in general, putting pressure on Uranus, her head, depression, manic episodes, and electroshock therapy, Aries head. So that's there in her chart, and that's there's a lot. There was a lot going on inside, but we're honestly just getting started with that. And next, I actually do want to head into her personal planets. We do have her sun falling in the 8th house in Scorpio. This is a deep psychological person, but likelihood of depression with both your luminaries in the 8th house, very high. High likelihood of depression, of struggling with mental illness, mental health topics coming up quite a bit in the 8th house, but in the sign of Scorpio too. Destruction and loss of herself, which is really challenging because she's fixed. She has a lot of fixed placements here. Look, many of her most significant placements are falling in fixed signs. So she didn't want to be constantly changing, but she had to learn the lesson of surrender and change always. 8th house luminaries, both of them, this is a person who will change consistently through their life, almost like they're free falling through their own existence, free falling, and it doesn't end. And in Scorpio, doubling down on that transformation, doubling down on digging to the depths, she had no choice but to live this very intense world in her head, this very intense and sensitive experience, water sign, but she could not hold on to the stability that other people around her maybe seem to have. And we see this actually with her Mercury also being in Scorpio. This is someone who's going to speak the truth and talk about some dark stuff, maybe even prefer to talk about it. But what's happening with her Mercury here is that it's opposing both Lilith and Chiron. Lilith and Chiron in Taurus in the 3rd house, a rejection of mental stability. She likely looked at people who were stable and thought that stability represented a lack of depth or a lack of awareness or someone who didn't quite get it. And she didn't want that. It might have been horrifying to her. But they're also Lilith and Taurus in the third house. She wanted stability, but she couldn't get it. She couldn't have it. She's got that Lilith that's opposing to Mercury. And this was like always a desire. It's like, I just want to feel safe. I just want life to feel good, but grasping for it, but it wasn't quite achieved. It was always out of touch. Opposing to Chiron and Taurus in the third house. This is interesting to me because we know that she put a lot of pressure on herself to achieve. She was very competitive with herself at school and in her writing and her work. And it looks to me with this Chiron placement that third house, she might not have ever believed she was as smart as she was. This is like, she was always pushing herself because she never saw herself as being at an acceptable standard, basically. So this did help her become an incredible writer because she had unbelievable work ethic and drive and ability also to produce quite a bit of literature. But this opposition is kind of driving her from a place of shadows in many ways. And this is really hard. The opposition of Lilith and Chiron to Mercury and Scorpio this is really hard mental health stuff because Mercury is your mind and your intellect. Even before it's your communication, it's your mind. And I think we forget that sometimes. That's how you're thinking. That's your processing system every single day. Scorpio, always changing, very deep, very psychological, thinking about death, thinking about endings, awareness of loss. And then it's opposing these sensitive placements, both having to do with shame, which are conjuncting each other in the sign of stability. We don't get that with this chart. And then opposing the sign of instability, of change, Scorpio. She probably could not predict how she was going to feel one day to the next. She probably tried for a while and then gave up because this is a really hard aspect. But Mercury in the ninth house, a search for higher meaning. And this is where we get a little bit philosophical. And it's different than like Poe's chart because here she's looking for a higher truth, almost like a ribbon of fabric that runs through all things in life. So she was a good observer of witnessing things, but there was something spiritual in the way that she presented her writing, in the way that she saw the world, because there was this awareness of interconnection. Like she writes about, like, for example, the stars regarding her. She seemed to have an inherent awareness that the world is alive and we are a piece of that, versus like we are the dominators of the world, just here with our intellects to build society. Like she recognized the vibrancy of all things. And we see that too, actually, in the fact that she has a waning crescent moon. So approaching a new moon phase, but not quite, actually about a sign away. So this moon phase, being the last lunar phase, is definitely someone who's aware of endings always. It's kind of like this crone energy, I want to say, like awareness of things passing, someone who is hyper aware of mortality and endings on a daily basis. This can manifest in more severe cases as a fascination or obsession with death. I think she kind of played more on that side, especially because we do know there were multiple suicide attempts. She said, I think, that she had one each decade of her life. And there is this, the moon is racing towards its finishing of the cycle here. Her emotional state is racing towards completion always. It's racing towards ending. But because these people are so aware of mortality, their life seems to be one of endings, they also can witness the intricacies and the details of existence and life in an unmatched way, because they're not racing out into the world like we see with a waxing moon. They're not, hey, I'm here, let's do this thing. They are going towards the completion. They're going towards the darkness. She is headed towards the very finality where there will be no more light of the moon. She's headed towards darkness, quite literally, with this lunar position. And in the 8th house, the fascination with death, she was always thinking about it, always. It's always something that was on her mind. And also with her sun squaring to Saturn there, it is a loose square, but we do see it. Someone who felt like they had to grow up and carry the weight of the world on their shoulders early. Again, we can see struggles with anxiety or depression, feelings of loneliness and isolation. The eighth house wants to merge on the deepest level, but there can be a feeling like no one can meet you there. And I see Saturn in the 11th house is relating to that. A loneliness in her experience. She was surrounded by people. She was popular. She was loved. She was beautiful. She had it going on from the outside. The Saturn stuff was there. But on the inside, she felt like no one could ever meet her at the level of depth that she was at. And that is a commonality between the post chart and this one, in different ways, though. But this completion phase. But what I have to talk about here is what's going on with the moon, because my jaw dropped when I saw this placement. Moon conjunct Juno at the same degree and minute. Now we're getting some details about who she was. The moon is you. It's how you feel inside. It's your emotional processing system. It's much more intimate and personal. And in many ways, it's much more you than your sun sign. Her moon in Libra in the 8th house. This is her relationship status and the life partner, because she wanted one life partner and she wanted them forever. This is Ted Hughes. Her well-being was directly linked to her relationship status, because her Juno, her life partner, was on top of her moon from the vantage point of Earth. You look up and you see literally, like, the moon was here, Juno was there from at the moment of her birth. They're fused, completely fused. There's no separation between the two in this chart. This is the hardest moon placement I've ever seen in my life as an astrologer for codependency issues, because it's falling in the sign of Libra. And in Placidus, this would fall in the 7th house, but it has 7th house and 8th house energy, in my opinion. Desire to merge souls. She talks about their creative process together and how at the beginning they were writing about each other, but then they would both still be in the same room, but they'd have to put a wall between them and they could do their work. But she was so, and you can hear in interviews where she speaks on him, like, she almost can't. It almost doesn't make sense, because it doesn't make sense to her. And there's this panic that's happening, especially with this awareness of the endings that she has with her lunar phase. There's this panic happening for her inside of like, oh my God, I know he doesn't feel the same way. In the 8th house, she wanted to merge on the deepest level. She wanted the soul connection. In the sign of Libra, she wanted the life partner. She was not playing games here. And the attachment to the partner is louder than anything else here. And this I actually see relating to her approach to her children too, which I'm going to talk about more. But yeah, her partner was everything. And so when her marriage fell apart, so did she, psychologically. 8th house. This is her moon. This is her feelings. So the codependency issues were so strong here, and something that she couldn't get away from. And when she met Ted Hughes and it got activated, that was it. Venus is here pretty close too. Venus conjuncting the vertex in the 7th house, and then the vertex conjuncting the south node. The vertex conjuncting the south node in general is a very faded aspect, both having to do with fate in general, but vertex south node, and then with Venus there, meeting the life partner early in life, which she did. She was young when she met Ted Hughes, and that being it, like they're there. Also with Moon Juno, meeting the life partner young, falling head first into that relationship. We also see Jupiter closely conjuncting the south node. So with both benefics conjuncting the south node here, Sylvia found her career success while she was alive and while she was young. She was recognized, she was loved. She became, even at one point, maybe more famous than Ted Hughes. Like, she was known for her work while she was alive, which is pretty rare. And that was her full-time job. The success came immediately. But with the 7th house, we see a life partner that helped her career, especially because her midheaven here, her career, is ruled by Jupiter here in the 7th house, conjuncting the south node, conjuncting the vertex, conjuncting to Venus. Ted Hughes was from an evolutionary astrology perspective, Ted Hughes was a destined part of her journey. Meeting that life partner, her career takes off. He supports her career because it's ruling the midheaven, conjuncting the south node. They're working together. He's helping her. All this stuff, brilliance. But again, we see confusion already, some mental health stuff, because Virgo south node is supposed to be someone who's got it kind of figured out on the surface, but then we've got Jupiter and Neptune conjunct, and that is confusing. Both have Pisces energy, both rule Pisces. There's some confusion already kind of there, and some mental health stuff that might be coming up, especially because Virgo's really in the mind. So she's trying to figure everything out. and makes sense with the world, Virgo South Node. But then Jupiter, Neptune there, she's getting messages from like other dimensions. She's aware of things that she doesn't know why she's aware of them, probably very intuitive. So there's already some confusion, and there can be a lot of mental health stuff because it's like Jupiter is trying to transcend reality, and Neptune is not reality at all. Neptune transcended reality. So there's a transcendent thing happening here too. 7th house South Node, codependency. This chart is the codependency of this chart is so incredibly challenging. Like I honestly can't say that enough. Look at the 7th and 8th house. Look at what's happening with her moon already falling in Libra, the sign of partnerships. That's a key theme, maybe the key theme, as well as her genius. Her genius we see with her sun and her Mercury in Scorpio. We also see it with her ascendant at 29 degrees of Aquarius, but super, super intense there. Okay, but next I also want to look at the square forming between her Mercury, her Mars, and Chiron. Again, we've got some mental health stuff. I talked about this opposition already, but we're adding Mars into the mix, 6th house. So we're seeing someone who is forward, dynamic, creative. This mental health stuff, actually, this is a hard aspect. T-squares are tense aspects because it's all tense. They're tense configurations because it's all tense aspects. But it's putting pressure on the point of the T-square. And in her case, that's Mars, 6th house. So that's the head. Mental health again. That's also your work ethic. 6th house, Mars rejoices in the 6th house. In the sign of Leo, creative. Being recognized for her work fueled her. And in the 6th house, she was able to produce so much. And we know that like as time passed in her career, she went into kind of a frenzy later on of producing like record-breaking amounts of quality literature at once. This is actually the positive aspect of this really intense dynamic T-square. But what is she writing about? She's writing about the mental health struggles that she's having, because those have opened her up to a perception of life in the world that is unique, that most people don't understand and don't have. And she realized that that was a gift. The world told her that was a gift. She was being recognized for it. She was famous for it already as a young person. South Node, conjuncting both benefics. But it's still hard. Like it's so much in there. The angstiness of this chart with the signs in consideration, with these multiple T-squares, especially with this really hard, like the affliction of this chart. Because the other thing here too is that her moon isn't aspected to anything besides Vesta, which is another asteroid, and Juno. So planetary wise, her moon is unaspected. So there was nothing. It was emotionally floating in a sea and always attached to the life partner, but also driven towards some sort of feeling like she had a purpose, as something to share through her work. So that's just important in the 3rd house of communication. She felt like she was bringing something to the world that she needed to deliver. But this unaspected moon, and then we have everything else being super afflicted, like Mercury afflicted, opposite Chiron square Mars. The sun being afflicted by Saturn. The Pluto T-square thing, affliction, outer planets afflicting each other. It's so hard. So a lot of struggles that she was having. And like, I think, like, I'll never forget the feeling I had when I first read the bell jar, and you go into it with her. And she said that that's kind of biographical and in some ways autobiographical. And it's like, oh my God. But again, we have someone who's seeing things, maybe more clearly than others, but her rejection of like the status quo and people who are, you know, overly stable, that's the opposition of Mercury to Lilith and Chiron coming into play. But this is such a hard chart. We do have the South Node in Virgo, but the North Node in Pisces out here, really beautiful placement. 1st house North Node people destined to grow into themselves to find their own voice. But in Pisces, opposite of Virgo, which is a sign of practicality, analytics, and using words carefully. So starting out with the strict grammar adherence and rules, trying to write perfectly, and then letting that go. A North Node in Pisces in the 1st house is someone who wanted to transcend mundane physical reality while they were in their body. 1st house, Pisces 1st house. She wanted to touch something of the divine. She wanted to experience life beyond, but she went into this frenzy, this Pisces frenzy, and was able to break free of the 7th house and of the partnerships through her work. Like when she went into her writing, she went all the way in, and this was a gift because she could let go completely and become her poem, so to speak. So it's really beautiful. And I see this as Pisces is so creative, having the creativity and the flow. And she already pleased Saturn by learning how to write. And then she just let it all go and let the words flow out of her. Her north node is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune conjuncting the south, though. So she was still writing. She never stopped writing. And she never stopped being a wordsmith, Virgo. But she was able to do it in a Pisces way, which is divinely intuitively guided, almost like she was channeling something. Who's to say, right? But Pisces is channeling. It's always receiving messages. So she almost hooked up to something. And I'm not saying channeling like it wasn't her writing. Maybe a better word would be like her soul, her higher self. Like she opened up the channel that was blocked by Virgo being maybe a little bit more heady early in life. She's got a lot going on in her mind. But when she was able to transcend that and open the channel, beautiful words flowed out of her. And she created something divine. That she was here. Her purpose was to bring that to us. And her vertex in Virgo, she was supposed to write, "This is destined." So the interesting thing too is that with the position of her nodes, they are actually squaring her midheaven. So being successful, Jupiter ruled midheaven in her career, being someone who breaks the mold and does things in a unique, independent way was a key part of her life, her journey. Her nodal journey went like that. So she had to integrate this career self. That was really, really important here. Her career success, Jupiter, was really important. And then she got to Pisces, and then she got to transcend. Unfortunately, this did take a darker turn, the desire to transcend, because she was successful in committing suicide. Unfortunately, Uranus in conjuncting very closely to Mercury in conjunct is not considered a traditional aspect, but it's very hard because it is signs that don't share a modality, a polarity, or an element. So again, mental health, Uranus, Mercury can always be mental health stuff, but it's also genius. So again, we're seeing a genius. So smart. The head, there's so much there. Okay, we also see her Leo Mars in conjuncting to her Ceres placement, and her Ceres conjuncting Saturn. So Ceres conjuncting Saturn, I see as motherhood, Ceres feeling like a lot of work, Saturn, it being hard for her. And with her moon so emotionally attached to her partner, and then Ceres attached to Saturn, it's like the motherhood part was hard, and the craving was for the partner. Also with the Pluto in the fifth house opposition, her life completely transforming when she had children. But there maybe being some, especially Pluto being in Cancer, maybe being some fear that came up around like, am I good enough to mother these kids? Am I capable of it? Some self-doubt, because we have that hard opposition with Ceres being apart. Motherhood might have been scary for her. It might have been scary for her to think about being a mom and raising kids. Pluto in the fifth house on its own, retrograde. Her soul was always changing. Retrograde Pluto people are like rapidly evolving in many ways. Like I just see it as them having a long checklist of things that they wanted to do as a soul, ways they wanted to evolve in this lifetime. A lot of things, like kind of like running a marathon as a soul. But Pluto fifth house people are known for having a sense deep down that they have a special destiny or purpose. Like there's this feeling of like, I'm here to do something special. There's something special about me. I have a special destiny and purpose. And in her case, she's right. This chart has a purpose. And she did it. And it's a big one. You can see it all over with many of the things I've said. But that feeling of like specialness is something really big that can come up too. But her relationship with her children, I personally don't know too much about it. I've kind of looked for it a little bit, but it's not the thing that people are usually writing about with her. Pluto in the fifth house in Cancer, definitely, it might have been really hard for her. She also likely experienced a feeling of like not living up to the potential that her mom wanted her to have, especially with the opposition to Pluto opposite Ceres. Feeling like she disappointed her own mom, maybe her own mom projecting for a long time her like desires onto her. Oh, and that's another thing too, is that with her Saturn placement in Placidus, Saturn falls in her 12th house. And then with the sun in the eighth, losing the father being a catalyst for her journey and a key part there. Saturn conjuncting Ceres, the mother Ceres, having to become both parents, Ceres, Saturn. Her mom had a lot of pressure on her, especially Ceres and Capricorn, but there might have been a feeling on Sylvia's part, like her mom almost projected her own unfulfilled dreams onto Sylvia and what Sylvia needed to achieve. So there's that potential there too. And of course, she's written about both of her parents, and you can see that here. Pluto being very analytical and psychological, always looking, always sitting across the table from Ceres and Saturn. Where did I come from? And also, like, what did you do to me? What did you do to my mind psychologically? Why? And so she has that poem, Daddy, and she talks about her dad, and it's very heavy. And the mother too, and she's always looking at them, but she's looking at them from the perspective of Pluto. So to her, there's transformation, there's death, there's loss, there's endings. After she lost her father, she was probably always waiting for the other shoe to drop, but she was never able to let go of the attachment to him, Pluto opposite Saturn. She was never able to let go of the image of her father, and that's the poem is about, killing the psychological weight of her dad that she was still holding on to, who she wanted him to be, the idealism, always carrying that with her, with the opposition. So it's really hard, but that was in there deep. Both of her parents lived in her psyche very deeply. And so with the Pluto fifth house, there could be a repetition of the cycle of her then subconsciously projecting her own wishes onto her children. Maybe she did do this, maybe she didn't, but that's a potential with a fifth house Pluto person. So that projection thing. Fifth house Pluto people also oftentimes really want kids or really don't want kids. So children were being a big part of the life here, but also her own children helping her to realize and recognize a lot of the stuff she still had to deal with and work through with her own parents. And it's interesting because that poem Daddy is like one of her best known works, and it's her Saturn in Capricorn, her dad, is conjuncting her part of fortune. In the sign of the collective, things you're known for, in the house of the collective, things you're known for. That poem was a success, especially because she was able to see it from Pluto very deeply. Also, she put a lot of herself, and that's the other thing too, is Saturn squaring the sun, adopting her dad into her self-image too, in a key part, and trying to undo that, which was very hard because there's nothing else happening to her sun. And again, we get another not aspected placement. And so when the luminaries are this unaspected, again, it can feel like you're floating or free falling and confused, and the self-image is unsure, uncertain, wavering in some way. In the eighth house, again, this free falling, who am I? She's trying to figure it out. She doesn't know, but she's writing about it. And that is what she feels like she's supposed to be doing, and that's what her chart wanted her to do, it seems. So evolutionary astrology looks at things as we don't have any accidents in our chart. There's no mistakes. It's all reflections of lessons that we want to learn. So like, why do you have this? What are you trying to learn? This is like an unbelievably rare aspect. And they're sharing a line here. They are completely one. Life partner, emotional awareness, living through the partner, seeing them not as two people, but one. And that being so painful when her marriage fell apart. And she has a control thing for sure. Control issues, struggles. And she has, but she couldn't control it. It slipped through her fingers. And she felt like she lost herself emotionally when she lost her Juno partner. Also, Scorpio is about mirroring and merging too. So she was always merging with the world around her, mirroring the world around her, becoming one with. And so when she so deeply did that through her marriage and then she lost it, she felt like she lost herself, is what I see. Now that we got into some more heavy stuff, I want to be honest and real with you in my readings. The last thing I want to do is upset or scare anyone ever. But life gets really heavy, charts get really heavy, and it can show us the good and the bad. You know, this is a brilliant birth chart, but it is hard. And I want to honor these people for the struggles that they went through, because we knew, like, we can tell in her writing that she was struggling, but we don't know the dimension of it. We don't know what it was like inside. And the way I see it, this is the closest we can get. This is the closest I've been able to figure out how to get into someone's psyche and to see their soul so purely and beautifully. So I I look at these charts with the utmost respect and honor, and I see so much strength and bravery as a soul to come in and take this chart on. It's hard, and it was hard from the beginning. So yeah, okay. Thank you so much for your interest in this reading. And if you have any feedback, questions, etc., I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thank you for being here, and have a beautiful rest of your day whenever it is, wherever you are. Much love.